Hello, everyone. I hope you guys are having the day that you intend to have today. I first want to say thank you so much for your patience. I have been promising this for a long time, but I wanted to make sure that my energy was clear and that I had the time and was able to hold space for this the way that I wanted to. So thank you. But also, I just want to make this very clear to everyone who may be watching. This is a non religious ancestral veneration, I guess, information session. I am not affiliated, nor have I been affiliated with any of the African traditional practices as far as religions go. So, this is just me sharing information about my personal journey towards ancestral veneration, what that looks like, what I've learned through connecting with elders and people who have been practicing for longer times than I have been. But my mission is to make this information accessible to people who might be not necessarily wanting to join any particular religion or practice, but still wanting to venerate their ancestors and learning the appropriate ways to do so. So, over the course of my research, what I've done is taken all of the things that are consistent amongst the information that I've gotten, which is like water, food, prayers, those kind of things, and then also just giving my own personal insight and input to what the process has looked like for me as someone who, like I said, hasn't necessarily been led through the process from any religious standpoint or any particular practice, excuse me. If you guys have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below. You can also visit my website, www.THACONJURESS.com. Under forums, you'll be able to find the link for just this PowerPoint. My voice will not be spoken over it, but it is something for you to refer to. You can leave comments there under the forum as well, or you can follow me on IG at THACONJURESS, where I'll post small up to dates and other things that are helpful throughout the journey. So, first, I want to just define the words separately. Ancestral veneration. Your ancestor is a person who preceded you in direct lineage and is now deceased. The reason that I have deceased here bolded is because I get a lot of questions about, like, can they put pictures of themselves with the ancestor on an altar? Do not put pictures of the living on your ancestral altar. The space is a portal for the dead to come through. What you do not want is to be attaching those kind of energies to yourself in a way that you can't unattach or detach those energies to yourself. Parents, grandparents, great grandparents, aunts, aunties, cousins, all of that, they are definitely people who can go on your ancestral altar. Another question I get is, if the person was younger than you, do they count as an ancestor? They do, because they've made that transition from being in the living realm to being in the ancestral realm. It's not necessarily about the age, but even in the ancestral realm, no matter how old they are, they still have access to information from that side that you do not have access to because you're on the living side. Another question that I get often is, can you put like step parents or step families up there? You absolutely can. Um, what I like to highlight is that soul ties are not just people who you've been intimate with. Soul ties are, or physically intimate with, I should say. Soul ties are also formed from just deep caring for a person. So if you were adopted, you can put your adoptive parents up on your ancestral altar. If you were close with their family and they took care of you, then you can put them on your altar. If you had a parent who got remarried and that person was good to you and treated you the way a parent should treat you, you can definitely put them on the altar. Another question I get is about ancestors who were not good people in this world, who struggle with things like just like abusive natures, malicious intentions, even addictions. Those are not people who you necessarily want to venerate in a way that you keep light on them at all times. we'll get into why that is as we get into the building of the altar. But you want to be asking for your benevolent ancestors, because those dark energies will find their way into your home, and they don't necessarily change. The elevation process is not one that absolves people of their earthly sins. That's not what this is. You're under no obligation to venerate your abusers. You're under no obligation to give light to those who had malicious intentions for you. You don't even have to acknowledge them. That is what essentially hell is when you cross over to the other side, you are in eternal darkness. You're finding that there's no light there, there's no elevation, there are no libations, there's no one really remembering your legacy. And trust me, that is not a place where people want to end up. People think that they're moving through their lives, and because they're getting away with things in the physical realm, that all is well, and it doesn't end well. So, but again, we'll get more into detail about that when we go into how to build up the altar. Your ancestors do not include your pets. Your pets are not ancestors. It doesn't matter if you had a dog who was like 14 when you were 5 and the dog passed away and you want to consider it an ancestor. It's not an ancestor. Some of you might be listening like, who would think it's an ancestor? But people like to try to put their pets on their ancestral altar, and that's not what it is. If you had a pet that you really cared about, you can set up a small little space for them and, you know, put food out. And I wouldn't necessarily say put a candle, but if you feel like you would like to put a candle, you can go ahead and do that. If you want to do things that remind you of your pet, some people, their pets attach themselves as spirit guides and spirit animals. So I've heard like my grandmother tell me that she sometimes feels like her cat jumped up onto the foot of the bed like he used to. It's a thing. So you might feel your pet around, but that's not an ancestral thing. That's the fact that you have also created a soul tie to this pet, and the pet wants to not leave your side. So it's a thing, but it's not an ancestral thing. The veneration part is something that I do want to spend a little time on, because people think that veneration means that you're just doing stuff at the altar and that's it. While that's the reverence part of veneration, regarding or treating with deep respect is the other part. And the way to do that is to move in this world in a way that would elevate and make your ancestors proud of you. So if you're going to go give your ancestors a whole bunch of offerings and then go out in the world and do things that are less than morally, grounded, you're not really venerating, you're just giving offerings. If you would do something that your most benevolent grandmother would look at and shake your head, if you find yourself going, ooh, I know if my grandma saw me doing this, she'd be rolling in her grave. She is. She's watching you and she's shaking her head. So you want to make sure that you're moving in a way that elevates the lineage while you're here, so that when it is your time to transition, those that come after you are not having to heal the karma and deal with the generational stuff that you've put on your family by not moving in light in the physical world. So as you are doing this reverence and veneration process and offerings, make sure that the number one offering that you give is moving through the world with integrity, with a clear heart, and through light. That is the most appropriate way to venerate your ancestors. I hear people a lot who are like, I don't know, I can't give offerings, I don't have the space. That's okay. Those things are helpful. Those things are necessary for the elevation and the light. But what you're doing with your physical self throughout the day, living your best life, living in your truth, doing the best that you can, being open, being honest, being humble, all of those things that make for a well-rounded, high vibrational person, those are the things that you should be doing in order to show your ancestors that you are treating them with deep respect. Why? Because they deserve it. That's it. We wouldn't be here if they weren't here. They wouldn't be here if those that came before them weren't here. Their willingness to just be here, their willingness to keep fighting, their willingness to keep doing what it is that they do is why we do it. Their willingness to continue fighting, to continue teaching. We always talk about how our ancestors died for our right to vote, but we don't talk about all the other things that some of our ancestors died for. Some of our ancestors died for the for the right to continue their own practices. Some of our ancestors died for the right to keep their children with them. Some of our ancestors fought for each other when they saw injustices. There were a lot of different reasons other than voting that our ancestors fought and died for. So we want to make sure that we honor all of those things the same way we honor the fact that they fought and died to vote. We want to make sure that we honor all of those things, that we speak about all of those things, that we think highly about all of those things, the same way we do for the things that we want to make trigger words or what hot topics in 2020. We want to give every single thing that our ancestors have been through and gone through and endured that same kind of respect, because one day we are going to be them. One day we are going to be ancestors. One day we're going to be on the other side hoping that we find light. One day we're going to be on the other side thinking to ourselves, damn, I should have done this. I should have done that. How can I make it right for the next generation? And the last thing you want to do is to get over to the ancestral realm and realize that you've spent your whole life piling more trauma, piling more karma, and piling more bullshit onto your ancestral lineage because you're leaving more behind for the next generation to have to fix. As a spiritualist, it is your duty. It's not a choice. It's not a if I feel like it, when I feel like it, it's too hard, it's taking too long, let me skip the step. It is your duty to heal, uplift, and connect with your ancestors. It doesn't matter what you try to do. If you skip that step, you're not doing anything. It doesn't matter how many decks you buy. It doesn't matter how many baths you sell. It doesn't matter how much divining or how many gifts you have. If you are not taking the responsibility of uplifting, connecting, and venerating your ancestors as the forefront of what it is that you're doing, then you are not a quote unquote spiritualist. You are someone sitting on the other side of a camera with some cards. You need to be, especially as a person of color, connecting to your ancestral roots before you do anything. For people who are not into or necessarily following a path of being considered a spiritualist, you still need to be grounded in your ancestors. It's not just a witchy thing or a practitioner thing or a spiritualist thing, but for spiritualists in particular, nothing moves until you get through that. So don't worry about your gifts. Don't worry about your business. Don't worry about this deck and that deck and this and that. And then the whole, I'm talking to my ancestors and they're telling me, your ancestors are not telling you to do anything directly when you've just started learning their names. They're not telling you to go out and start giving people advice when you haven't finished healing yourself. They're not going out and telling you how to help people get their lives together when your life is not together. The way to get your life together is not to start a spiritual practice. The way to start to quote unquote make money is not to start a spiritual practice. The way to all of that is to connect to your ancestors so they can guide you towards the next steps for your healing, for your abundance, and for your path. For everyone, however, your ancestors are everything: your foundation, your guidance, your protection, your light. What they are not genies. They are not servants. They are not guard dogs. They are not anything other than your ancestors. The same way you wouldn't say, my granny gonna get her, your living grandmother sitting right next to you is not gonna fight the girl that's talking about you behind your back. That's not what they're there for. When you are moving all funny and not paying attention to what you're doing and not following directions, they are not going to reward you. That's not what they're here for. They're not here to just give you what you ask for. They're here to show you how to get what it is that you're asking for. They're here to align you with what you're asking for and show you how to get there. They're not here to deliver it to your lap. They don't work for you. They don't owe you anything. You owe them everything, and you owe the next generation while you're here the foot up. You owe the next generation the ability to say, someone was able to teach me who my ancestors were. That's why it's important to not skip steps, because what's the point of opening a spiritual practice, opening a business, starting whatever it is, if you don't have the grounding to pass that on to the next generation? As far as the guard dog thing, your ancestors don't give a shit about what the next person is doing if it doesn't affect you. So all of that, oh, my grandmother takes care of my haters. No, she doesn't. She doesn't. She protects you from people who are aiming things at you. She protects you from people who are sending things in your direction. They might whoop somebody's ass for thinking they're going to light a candle against you. What they're not going to do is attack everybody that you don't like. What they're not going to do is come for people who you feel like you have beef with. That's not what this is. What they are also not going to do is protect you when you're wrong. If you are working with your benevolent ancestors, they are going to step back and let your ass get tapped up because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So don't walk around thinking that you're untouchable because your ancestors do this and your ancestors do that. They go to war when somebody's coming for war. They're not just there on the front line attacking everything that you feel like you don't like. That's not what this is. As far as the genie thing, my ancestors are going to give me this and give me that and sitting in front of your altar and crying about all these things you want, but you're not making the attempt to do what you got to do to get there. It's not how it works. If you are asking for clarity on a situation and you're like, oh, I just really want this thing, I really want this thing, and other things start to remove themselves from your space and you don't want to let those things go, you're not going to get what you're asking for, because they're moving things out of your way so that you can move forward towards the thing that you're asking for. They're not going to drop diamonds in your lap when you're sitting with garbage. They're going to clear the garbage out before they bring you to the diamonds. If you're not willing to let go of the garbage, then that's on you. But they're not just going to have things magically appear for you. However, when you do what you're supposed to do, you're on the right path. You're understanding what it is that you're supposed to be doing. You're doing what you should be doing with integrity and clarity and light and love and all other things that they're going to tell you what you need to do. Then it'll feel like things are falling in your lap. Then you'll feel like you'll have some genies because you'll say something like, I really like this kind of lemonade, but I can't find it. And then one day, walking through the store looking for something else, boom, there goes your favorite lemonade. It's because your ancestors want to reward you. They want to see you happy. They want to see you live a life of abundance, but they're not going to give that to you if you're being disobedient. They're not going to give that to you if you're lacking diligence. They're not going to give that to you if you're proving to them on multiple occasions in multiple ways during multiple situations that you either A, cannot handle it, or B, will not respect it. They're not going to work overtime in the background for you to keep flushing everything down the toilet. So make sure that you're clear on why you're connecting to your ancestors. If you're connecting with them for the intention of gaining something other than a relationship, it's not going to work. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how. This is where the questions usually come in. So I'm going to start with the non-negotiables, and then I'll just talk through some different scenarios to help you guys out. So the non-negotiables are water. You need 2 glasses. One of the glasses of water is the libation offering. The second glass is the portal. Water holds spiritual vibrations. So that water allows your spirits to move how they need to move, your ancestors to move how they need to move. What I do, I make Florida water. So I put Florida water in the top of my water. Use a little spray bottle, spray a couple of sprays in it. You want to make sure that the water is not cloudy. If you don't make your own Florida water and you would like to use store-bought water, Florida water, that's fine too. If you live near Botanica, you can get it there. If you live in a Hispanic or Latin neighborhood, you may be able to just find it like in a convenience store. If not, you can order it on Amazon. They do have it. It's a little bit more expensive from Amazon, but it's the same Florida water. What helps is to put it in a spray bottle because it's alcohol based, so it turns the water cloudy. But you're spraying it to make sure that whatever comes through, well, I'm spraying it to make sure that whatever comes through is benevolent, that there's nothing coming through that I don't want there. It's also an offering for spirits. They like the way that it smells. They like the way that it feels. I've used Kananga water too in the past. If you know what that is and you have access to it, I've given Kananga water as an offering. The libation water is just that. It's just an offering of clear water. Names, if you have them, photos, birthdays, personal items. I know some people don't have access to those things, and it's okay if you don't. If you do not, you can literally just use the term unnamed, benevolent ancestors of morality and light, so that you're letting your ancestors and the spirit realm know exactly who you're calling. Do not just sit in front of a candle and say you're calling in your ancestors. Some of us have some terrible ass ancestors. Some of us have some ancestors that are like, don't need to be called in to, for, or around anything, especially when you have children in your home. So make sure that you're asking for ancestors of morality and light, those who are benevolent, those who have good spirits, those who have high vibrations, so that you're not calling in anyone who's done anything malicious or who's lived a life of malice in their living life. In the beginning, I said I would speak more about that. So, for instance, if you had someone in your life who struggled with alcohol, you don't want to put alcohol on the altar. If that person was a good person outside of their struggles, then it is someone who can be venerated. But if someone drank and became violent, if someone drank and became abusive, or if someone drank and became just someone that no one wanted to be around, then you definitely would not want to be venerating that person, because that kind of energy is being invited into your home. If there was somebody who, without dealing with any types of addictions, was abusive, malicious, did things that were of low moral standing, and even like lived in darkness, those are also not people who you want to venerate. You don't want to invite that energy again into your home, especially when you have children around. It can lead to you feeling overwhelming sadness. That also goes to people who dealt with things like depression, who dealt with things like mental illnesses that inhabited their ability to function in their day to day. That does not include people with intellectual disabilities. An intellectual disability is very, very different than someone with a mental illness. So if you had someone in your life who had an intellectual disability, you can absolutely venerate that person. But if you are dealing with somebody that has had a mental illness that was not dealt with, something that was not necessarily managed well, then that's not energy that you want to bring into your home. I know we have people who we did love. We have people who commit suicide. You don't want to necessarily venerate that person either. Not that you never can. Your ancestors can definitely get to the point where they walk you through that. I have a few ancestors on my altar who I have been walked through by other ancestors exactly what to do in order to elevate them and keep their energy clear. But when you're just starting out, you want to start out with ancestors who lived in love and light and benevolence while they were here. You also don't have to start with every single ancestor. It's not like, let me go make a tree and have my whole lineage up at one time. If you were extremely close to somebody who lived in this realm, start with one person. It doesn't have to be every single person. If there were two people, let's say you had a grandma and a grandpa who you were like, in life, everybody loved going to the house. You remember, you have fond memories. You know that their pasts are clear of darkness and malevolence. I'm sorry. You can definitely, venerate both of them, but don't get yourself bogged down on, let me, you know, get everybody at one time. You don't have to get everybody at one time. Also, I will note, for practitioners, for spiritualists, for people who want to get into the occult and conjure, it is extremely, extremely disrespectful to skip all of the people who are closest to this realm, people who may have taken care of you, people who were close to the people that took care of you, and attempt to skip 5 generations back because you heard that somewhere in some other time you had an aunt or a grandma who practiced a certain thing. So you've now skipped everyone and you're asking this one person to help you manifest your gifts. It's so disrespectful. It's like walking into somebody's house and then thanking somebody else for you being there. It's like walking into your grandmother's house and then turning to your aunt and saying, thank you for inviting me. Where's the thanks for your grandmother whose house that you're currently in? Do not skip that step. That's hard to come back from when your ancestors realize you're willing to skip all of these people so that you can get to a gift. Then you'll feel like nothing will manifest. Then you start feeling like, oh, something is coming for me. Somebody put something on me. Nothing put anything on you. Your ancestors are looking at you all types of crazy because you just try to skip a bunch of steps so that you could figure out how to practice something that you're not even grounded in. So make sure that you are starting with who you know, and the goal there is to build a relationship so that you know who they are. With that said, if they didn't walk the earth with you, they don't know who you are either. Some of them walk with us as far as protection, keeping us along the right path, making sure that no harm comes to us. But as far as knowing like what our favorite color is, what kind of food we eat, who our friends are, the kind of music we like, they're not just like snooping on us all the time. We do have autonomy over ourselves. We have the ability to make decisions. We can keep secrets. There's things that they don't know. It's not an intrusive level of I'm all in your space. So use this time that you're venerating and getting to know them to also give them the space to get to know you. Share your favorite dishes with them. If you know you had we all of everybody has a tradition of turning on music to do something. Sometimes play music that you like and explain to them. My grandmother all the time when I'm in here that she'll be listening to something and then I could hear her, here she go gyrating again. And I'll be in the room twerking and doing something. And I'll be like, y'all, this is my song. Let me tell you what happened. And I'll tell them like a memory that happened when I was a freshman in college about this song. And it helps them get to know who I am as a person. Talk to them out loud. Speak to them the same way you would speak to somebody who's a new friend who you're getting to know. You might see this person around all the time, but you don't really know them just because you've seen them move. You know them by sitting down and getting to know them. Another thing is don't assume that they know what you want. They know what's best for you. They know when you're making decisions that you're not supposed to be making, but they don't just know what you want out of life. They don't know what you want to get out of life along your journey. They just know where you're supposed to end up. So if you're saying to yourself, hey, I want to be like I want to be aligned to my greatest path, my highest self. They'll take you there, but if you also want to travel, say that. If you also want to have experiences at food truck events, say that. If you want to have experiences with music and that's not necessarily on your path or art or whatever it is, say that. Let them know what it is that you want so that when they see these opportunities coming for you, they're able to help guide you to the ones that are for you and keep you away from the ones that are not for you. But if you run headfirst into everything that seems like it's what you want, they don't really know till they're put in the situation to have to help you. Speak your intentions. What do you want to do today? What do you want to do next week? What are some plans that you have down the line? You might want to go on a trip with your friends. If you're planning a trip that's going to be a terrible ass trip and your ancestors don't really know what's going on until you get there, you put yourself in a compromising position and you put them in the position to not be able to help. For some of us, our ancestors may have been spiritual practitioners in the way that their spirits hold weight in the spirit world. They hold a lot of weight. They're known when they get over there. It's like you did what you were supposed to do for mankind. Those ancestors might have a less trouble pushing through. They're more elevated than other ancestors who maybe didn't practice those things. Not that they were good people or better people, but they were tapped into the spirit world in life. So when they transition, it's not they're not getting to the other side and having to wonder what things mean and what's going on. We have some ancestors that when they transition, they don't know what the hell is going on. Don't assume that because you're doing something your ancestors know, especially when you're being introduced to practicing any type of conjure. You might be conjuring something that your ancestors didn't do. And then you're calling on them for help and they're like, we didn't do this, so I don't know. And then you're feeling like, I don't hear anybody, nobody's helping, I don't understand. And it's like they really don't know. They again they're not omniscient. They don't know every single thing. They don't see every single thing. They know and see what is necessary for you. They know and see what is necessary for the lineage. I've had so many people in my life whose stories I don't know. As a shadow reader, I don't just see people's shadows. When it gets to the point where those people's shadows are starting to impact my ability to walk my path, then everything starts flowing. Now they're getting information. Now they're telling me what's going on because now it's starting to affect me. That's how your ancestors work. They're not just going to give you the scoop on everybody, because everybody's ancestors are not just giving up the scoop on everybody. You're going to have some people who you can't be read by because you go get a reading. It doesn't resonate because your ancestors know that that person doesn't mean well and they're blocking the reading. Your ancestors know when whatever you're doing that pertains to you is going to be problematic to you, which then stems back to that they're not just out here attacking people because y'all beefing. If the person is not coming for you in a way that's detrimental to your path, your wellness, your livelihood, your mental, or any of that, and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then they don't care about that. They don't care about any of that. So make sure that how you're venerating, who you're venerating, and your reason for venerating are all clear as you move through this process. You do need some type of prayer. If your family was associated with a particular tradition that used songs, drums, or mantras as a form of ancestral prayer and you know it, then do that. There are times where I have Native American drums going in the background. There are times where I have a few ancestors who were Hindu. I play Hindu mantras in the background. Then I also have some ancestors who were Christian. I have some ancestors who were Hebrew Israelites. I play their traditional music for them, but prayers. So things that are clearing the air, things that are calling in positive energy from higher beings and higher forces. Our fathers and Psalm 23s are powerful for those who may not know where to start. When I say Psalm 23, I replace the Lord with my ancestors. I'm visualizing my ancestors walking with me. I'm visualizing them leading me beside still waters. I'm visualizing them restoring my soul. I'm visualizing them with me while I'm walking through my darkest times, and it helps me feel connected. Another thing is something that symbolizes life and creation. Some people use a cross, some people use an ankh, some people use a Star of David. It can be any powerful totem that means something to you. I've seen people use goddesses. I've seen people use like wolves, spirit animals. I've seen people use a lot of things. I have a bunch of things up here myself, but anything that would symbolize life and creation. Some people put flowers on their altar as a non-negotiable. I don't necessarily have that as a non-negotiable because some people's ancestors don't require that. It feels weird. I know for me, putting flowers up was like an odd thing. People in my family didn't do the cut flowers in a vase thing. But I also come from a line of herbalists. So for them, it was like, there's no point of having a bunch of roses on an altar or on a table. But my ancestors asked me to keep something alive. So I have a live plant on my altar that I water. I give it light. I give it whatever it needs. You can put flowers though. If you would like to use flowers, start with white flowers or lightly colored flowers. The reason is that colors emit frequencies, they emit vibrations. So you tend to call in what it is that resonates with that color. For instance, if you're trying to do like abundance work, you will use green because the vibration of green means money. If you're somewhere where money's not green, you might use a gold candle because the vibration of gold is money. Same thing with love, passion, and anger. When you use red, those things vibrate at a certain frequency and they invoke certain emotions. So what you want to do is make sure that the colors that you use on your altar invoke emotions of purity, of calmness, of safety, of love. Some people use light blue candles. Some people use blue candles in general. I've used blue candles in the past. I haven't strayed too far from like pastel colors, so pinks, light pinks, not like a sexy pink, like a Victoria's Secret pink, but like a very powder pink, um, light blue, white, but just things that like Easter colors, I guess, if you celebrate or know what those are, pastel type of colors, things that are soft, Try to avoid putting any harsh or brightly colored candles because the energies that are attracted to those colors and that vibration might not be what you're trying to call in. Another question that I get a lot is about the food. You'll notice that non-negotiables is not food right now. When you're just getting started, you don't necessarily, you can feed them, but I would start with fruit, which is the reason that I did not put food up here, because people start stressing about what do they like, what don't they like, I don't know what to offer them. And for some ancestors, they're not elevated enough to even receive the offering, which is another reason why it's not necessarily a non-negotiable when you're getting started on your own. Your ancestors, when I'm saying they need to be elevated, it's almost like, if you ever, this is a terrible this is a terrible analogy, but it's the best one that I can think of. If you've ever watched a vampire movie where they find like the oldest original vampire in a coffin and he's all dried out or she's all dried out and there's no life there, they're still kind of strong because they have earned that right as being older and more powerful, but they're not at their best until they've had nourishment, which in a vampire's case is blood, but in your ancestors' case, it's libations, it's water, it's light. When you give them that water and that light, then they're at full capacity to come through and accept other offerings. Then they're at full capacity to come into your dreams. They're at full capacity to push into the real, like the material world for you. Some of our ancestors are not elevated enough in order to do the thing that we're stressing about anyway. They're like, oh, they won't tell me what they like. They probably are not elevated enough to receive what you're giving either way. If you are the first person to be venerating in a long line of people who haven't been, like 10, 15, 20 years, nobody's been venerating, you have to think of how many generations have gone without light. You have to think about how many generations have gone without veneration. So if the last person to venerate anyone in your family was in the 1700s, you have hundreds of years between then and now before someone has lit a candle and done any elevation or veneration work. That's a lot of light necessary. That's a lot of light needed. That's a lot of healing and elevation that needs to happen before some of the other things that you guys are expecting. Before some of the things that you guys are looking for are even possible, there's going to need to be consistent light, libations, and prayer. If you would like to give food, I suggest you start with fruits because those are life-giving. They are living things. It's an offering of life. When you give cooked foods, they're not alive anymore. When you give like chicken, it's a sacrifice. It's a sacrificial offering essentially. It's not a live offering. Fruit is living until you eat it. So you want to make sure that when you are giving those kind of things, when you're giving libations and you're giving offerings and you're just getting started, that all of the things that you give represent some type of love, light, and elevation, some type of clarity, some type of cleansing. If you know that something is passed down through your blood lineage, like a particular type of illness, or for women in particular, womb traumas in general, do your healing at your altar. I used to give my ancestors some red raspberry and black cohosh tea, and I would drink some myself, and I would sit and meditate and do some sacral chakra meditation, and with the intention to heal all of the womb traumas that the women in my family have endured, because I know that between birth and all the other traumatizing shit that has happened to women of color, there's so much womb trauma being held there that that's something that needs to be healed. Be intentional about what you're doing when you put offerings there. Be intentional about how you give offerings. Be intentional about when. Be intentional about what they are. Be intentional about sharing things with them. It's not about putting down a plate, saying a prayer, and then walking away. It's about a conversation. Say good morning. How is everybody? Even if they don't answer, even if you think you're not getting an answer, the fact that you're speaking in general is adding to the vibration, is adding to that love space, is making the connection. Speak to them like they are with you. Treat them like they are with you. It's a little bit difficult when you first get started because you are kind of putting food out and you're hoping for a response. But again, that response takes time depending on how long it's been since the last time someone's venerated a person in your family. Um, One practice that I learned that was helpful for me was the actual visible elevation process, where I took a candle, a white candle. For me, I chose to use $9 bills. I've heard to use pennies. I've heard to use coins. I've heard to use ancestor money. I personally decided to go with nine because it's the ancestor number. Um, dollar bills, and I put them with the candle and my ancestors' names on a piece of paper. Every day for 9 days, I rose the candle and I said my prayers. And then I told them what I want for them. It wasn't about what I want for me. It wasn't about where I see myself. What I wanted was for them to be elevated enough to give them light, to be able to help guide me through the path that is most honorable for our lineage. That's all I wanted. I wanted them to be able to guide me. I wanted them to have light. I wanted them to know that I was in it to make sure that they got what it was that they needed. And every time I added someone new to the altar, I did the same process. I got a candle with $9 bills, and every day for 9 days, I elevated the candle by adding another book under it. If you don't leave your candles burning consistently, light the candle, elevate, say your prayers, let it burn. If it's a tea light candle, if it's a candle that you put out, let it burn for a little bit, put it out, and then do it again. But you have to remain consistent. There's no like, oh, I can't get to it today. I skipped the day. I'll come back to it tomorrow. You need to do this consistently for 9 days, whether you choose to do it in the morning or at night. I chose to do it in the morning with sunrise. Every sunrise, I lifted the candle up with another book. Some people like to do it during witching hours. That's an option too. That's between 3 and 4, but I know that a lot of people are not necessarily up that late. So choose whatever time works for you, but just make sure that you're doing it consistently. Lastly, before we end here, I want to give you guys an activity for those of you who are just getting started. If you are just getting started, it's an activity that anyone can do. I've done it before. If you have an altar and you have it set up and you're ready to do the work, I sit with them, I talk to them, I write, I tell them what it is that I'm trying to do, I pray, I say my Psalm 23 if that's what I'm going to say. If not, I make up prayers for my ancestors sometimes. It's almost like a petition, like, this is what I want for you guys, this is what we got going on, whatever that looks like to you. But sleep at the head of the altar, or the foot of the altar, I should say. Sleep as close to it as you can. If it's in your bedroom, you won't really have to do this process necessarily, but just make sure that they are the last people that you speak to before you go to bed at night. For me, though, I sleep at the foot of the altar when right after I have finished having like a long, deep conversation with them. So sometimes I'll get to the point where I'm in full tears and I'm just sobbing and going through it. And then I curl up at the end of the altar and I go to sleep. I don't necessarily stay there the entire night, but I do fall asleep there because the emotions and the energy are high. What happens is we sometimes build up these spaces where the energy is high and the emotions are high, and then we wipe our faces, we wipe our tears, we say thank you, and then we leave the space and then we go somewhere else where the vibration is completely different. Stay there for some time. Even if you don't sleep, just sit in silence. Allow yourself to feel, because those open moments, those moments where our emotions are flowing, those moments where our heart spaces are open, those are the moments where those connections are made. Those are those moments where the soul ties are created, or the ties are created, I should say. One other thing I do, now that I just said it, want to acknowledge is that souls and spirits are two different things. Your soul is your life force. It's the thing that is with you in life. When you transition to the ancestral realm, your soul is not going to stay with you. Your soul is going to go on to be reincarnated into wherever else it's going, whoever else it's going to be. Your spirit is what ties you to this realm. Your spirit is what ties you to the ancestral realm. Your spirit is what needs the elevation when you are in the ancestral realm. Your spirit is your memories, your feelings, your thoughts, your actions. Everything that ties you to your living world goes with your spirit when you transition. Your life force goes somewhere else, which is why sometimes we meet our quote unquote soulmates, is because our souls have been transitioning through these spaces and finding their way back into the living realm. But our spirits will stay. So when we transition, our spirits will remember what we liked, what we didn't like, what we ate, what we didn't eat, our favorite music, our favorite TV shows. All of that stuff goes into our personalities. All of that stuff gets filed away with our spirits. Our souls will go on to either ascend and become ascended masters, or they will come back to this earth because there's something else that they need to do in order to evolve. Sometimes your karma has it that you come back as a bug that gets smashed on somebody's windshield. Sometimes you come back as an animal. Sometimes you come back as another person in your lineage. Sometimes you come back as a person in somebody else's lineage. It just depends on what your soul's going to do when it gets to the other side. So that's why I stress so much talk like you're talking to a person, because you are. You're talking to the essence of a person. You're talking to somebody who has likes and dislikes. You're talking to somebody who had beliefs. You're talking to somebody who had friends and a family. You're talking to the essence of a human being. It's easier to process the more you're able to remove yourself from the physical world as a spirit. When you are living in this world and you're able to remove yourself from the idea that we have a house, we walk, we get into a car, we eat, we have like physical, tangible things to touch. When you're able to disconnect yourself from that being your reality and allow yourself to see the reality that you are a spirit walking this world, you are a soul navigating this world for a purpose, and that everything physical is literally temporary. Everything physical is literally the shell that you are walking around in while you figure out what your spirit purpose is. The easier it is to conceptualize that you're talking to a spirit on the other side. It gets hard sometimes because you're looking for certain things a certain way. So that's another tip. Don't look for it to look a certain way. It looks different for everyone. It has a lot to do with who our ancestors are on the other side. Again, going back to the weight that our ancestors hold in the spirit realm. For some of us, our ancestors were practitioners. For some of us, our ancestors were healers. For some of us, our ancestors were diviners. So they spent their whole lives with one foot in the spirit world anyway. So when they get there, it's like, okay, now I'm just switching weight and I'm now one foot in the physical world. So it's a little bit easier for them to come through because they know the different modalities. They were doing it when they were here. But then when you have an ancestor who was devoutly a particular religion, they're not exactly sure what to do when they get to the other side, because for so long it's been something that they didn't believe in. So then to get over there and realize, like, damn, there is this whole world that I kind of have been taught not to accept, they're still over there learning too. They're still over there transitioning. They're still over there making the adjustment to not being here. So be patient with them. Be patient with yourself. Don't commit yourself to it looking a certain way so that you're not condemning yourself when it doesn't look that way. Allow it to flow. Things will come as they want, things will come as they need to. The best example I have is feeling the type of way that my friend came to my house and was seeing all my ancestors. And I was like, that's crazy how she could see y'all and I can't see y'all. Y'all just manifested for other people. What's up? And my grandmother said, you know how many people in this house want you to see them? If we all just showed up, would you really want to wake up to me sitting on the end of your bed looking at you? I had to be realistic with myself. No, I do not. I'm perfectly cool with hearing them. I'm perfectly fine with seeing everybody in my dreams. But would I be okay if I just walked into my altar room and my grandma was sitting in a chair? I don't know. I don't know. I can't say that I would. I can't say that I wouldn't. But they know me better than I do because I've been teaching them who I am. And my grandmother was like, I don't think so, baby girl. I think that you would shock yourself out of even hearing us if you just came home one day and we were just standing in the room. She might be right. So don't rush it, because as long as I've been talking to them, the more I think about it, I would not just want somebody to pop up. My rational brain wouldn't handle that well. Not because I'm afraid, but I'm very rational, I'm very logical. So the idea that one of my ancestors would just manifest as a spirit that I can see, my brain would not process that. My brain wouldn't process that unless there was a logical explanation for it. And they know that. So give them the space to identify what is best, the best way to connect to you, the best way to communicate with you, for them and for you. Don't be so hard on yourself. Don't stress it. This is not a process of like right or wrong. They're already on the other side. The most you can do is give them the wrong kind of cheese. It's not like you can do major damage to the other side. The most damage that you can do to your lineage is acting recklessly in your life. The most damage that you can do to your lineage is doing the wrong thing and adding negative karma to your lineage, creating more generational curses for your lineage. You can do more damage with your own personal day to day than you can by putting the wrong thing up on the altar. So just be gentle with yourself, be patient, take the time, and everything will be okay. I hope that you guys continue to have the day that you intended to have today. This is the first lesson or the first session. I'm just trying something out. I have not done this before, so your feedback is definitely welcome. Please let me know in the comments, let me know on IG. Just give me whatever feedback it is you have. I love feedback. I like to improve. I like to make things more streamlined. I like to make them better for you guys. Thank you again for your patience, and look out for the next session in a couple of weeks.